Steadily it rises.
Hey, it's ODB, the Lincoln Addict, back with another video. If you saw the thumbnail, we're going to look at the 65 Lincoln Continental Convertible. Stick with me to the end. I'll tell you if I think it's worth the asking price of $90,000 or best offer. So if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. What we're going to do is we're going to do a deeper dive into the 65 Lincoln Continental that you see here. I do have my slides that I'll kind of go through as well. This, again, will be a deeper dive. The car is located in Colorado, and this is an eBay listing. So lately, I've been doing mostly Bring a Trailer, which is short for BAT, simply because that is really, in my opinion, the go-to place to sell a car in 2024. This car basically has the VIN listed. It shows 84,000 miles, which is kind of a typical, sub 100K car. A lot of these cars weren't driven a lot, so it's not. It's not something that, is something that you rarely see, is what I'm trying to get at. Like, you will see these cars sub 100,000 if those are quote unquote the original miles. There's a long list of stuff that has been done to this car. And I would tell you, if you were looking to buy a 65, certainly this might pique your interest. They've bullet pointed this out, which I think is better than what most people do, especially on eBay, because they don't really hold your hand, so to speak, like Bring a Trailer does. What they've done is they've listed out a bunch of stuff: interior, exterior, engine, and then miscellaneous. So we'll kind of go through that as well. What I want to do here is let's take a look, just kind of a little bit quicker look at the presentation that I have. We can see in 65, we know there's 3,356 convertibles built for that production model year. They've listed that on eBay as well. That's a selling point. A lot of people can find that by Googling, and they like to reinforce, hey, there's only, 3,500 of these made, which, piques some people's interest. This is a snapshot that I just took from Haggerty, and you can see the excellent condition would be at about just north of 75,000. And of course, you would add 10%. This is an air conditioned car, so that gets you into, the mid 80s, give or take. The serial number is a 5Y, which we'll look at. The first digit, many of you know, if you've been watching my channel, represents the year. This is a 65 Lincoln. The photo here is a direct copy. Unfortunately, some of these listings on eBay, they just don't have super high quality photos, and that's kind of a pet peeve of mine. There are ways, I think, to add more than the normal amount that eBay allows, and even the resolution, but certainly not everyone does that. If we look at the VIN on the Lincoln registry, it was entered, you can see here on the grid, on 10/21/2023. And what I want to do is I want to actually jump over to the Lincoln registry. This is why it's good to check it, because the gentleman that does this, he'll often put a comment in here, and he says it was for sale in Lone Tree, Colorado, October 2023. So just under a year ago. It was also for sale at Gateway Classics in Denver. And then he mentioned something that we will see: the dash instruments have been updated to decoded digital. And that's a good little insight, because I will tell you this, for those that don't know, buying at Gateway Classics, I'm not saying anything good or bad about them, but, they are like kind of I think the best word is a cosigner, or consignment, I think is the proper word. But they will mark the cars up, and then what they typically do is say, hey, we can guarantee that, we'll give you $50,000 or $55,000 for this car. And if they sell it for $75,000, then they keep that difference. But certainly it doesn't indicate that it's listed there at this point. It just appears that it's on eBay by the owner, if that makes sense. We can break down the VIN. The 5 indicates 65. The Y is Wixom. They were all made at the Wixom plant in Michigan. 86 in this case is the four-door convertible. The letter N is very standard. That's the Mel 430, which is the engine that they used from 58 to 65. The last 6 digits, if you've been watching the channel, you know that it always starts with a 4. but we ignored that number, and this was the 9,092nd created or built, if you will, for that model year. Now, if we look at the bottom here, we can see for 65, there's a total of 40,180 units. Again, that's not a significant. Really, the number that we want to hone in on is there's 3,356 convertibles built for that model year. John Cashman and many others have speculated, are there even 50% of those that still exist because of fires, accidents, rust, parting cars out, you name it. So your guess is as good as mine. I would say there's probably 30 to 40% of those that still exist. But it's really hard to gauge that. Unfortunately, there's not a VIN photo here, so we cannot break down the VIN plate, which would give us information like the destination sales office, the original color, things like that. Now, because we don't have the VIN plate, this was a recent, several months ago, I think back in April, I did a review, and I just left this here as an example only because this car is in the 9,000 production. One that I did 4 months ago was in the 5,000 production, and that was a 25J. So that would have been in the September timeframe of 64, right, for the 65 model year. Being that this is 9,000, it really could have been October, November. Not a huge significance, but it is nice to be able to kind of tell from the VIN plate when, the day that the car was produced. Now, I want to jump over here to eBay, and then we'll look at some of the pros of the listing. So first, what we got to do is we can maximize the photos, and we can kind of go through them. Of course, we see the 65, very distinctive from the back. You have these 1 year only bumper inserts, and then you also have the pattern that is no longer here, which is on 64. There's a trim piece, and again, that is not present in 65. You basically have the cages, if you will, 1 year specific only on the taillight cages, if you will. So you've got the lines, and then you have the bumper inserts, as I indicated there. We can see here a side view. It has the factory wheel covers, also known as hubcaps, and it has a factory style white wall, so that slimmer white line, which so many people like, personal preference, of course. It's hard to tell if the caps have been polished. They almost seem like they have, and that's something that a lot of us have done. You can get them high-speed polished. It wouldn't be the exact factory look because the factory look has more of like a brushed finished. It's not a kind of a shiny chrome stainless polished, if you will, look. You can see here, 65, of course, distinctive front end. You either love these front ends or you're not a fan of them, or maybe you fall in between, but certainly 65, this front end looks like some of the Mercuries, and I'm a huge fan of 65. I own a red 65 myself. Here we can see the top up, so that does indicate that the top does work, although unfortunately there's no videos. We can see here it has the red interior. The 65 that I have also has red interior. I maybe wasn't a huge fan of it until I owned my 65, and certainly I would say I absolutely love it. We can see here another view. It is a 1 year only insert here for the seats, so all four of them are here. What we can see is everything looks to be there. It does look like it has front seat belts, which I think in 65 was automatic. I forget if it was a feature or it was automatic. I think it was automatic, but the rears were a feature, if I remember correctly. They're not typically always available in 65 in the rear. We can't see a lot from these photos. Again, they are a little bit grainy, unfortunately, but that just is what it is. One thing that does stick out that was mentioned on the Lincoln registry is it does have decoded digital gauges. Now, for anyone that's not familiar, this company's been around a long time, and they have a fantastic product. The reason why they switched out is more than likely the gauges weren't working. So they either did it themselves or they paid someone to upgrade. You have to take out all of this. You have to trim a little bit on the back, not the end of the world, and these will fit in there. These gauges, I would say, look, if you can get the factory gauges working, most people are going to want that. However, it's better to have some sort of gauge than nothing, okay? So at the end of the day, I'm a fan of these products. I like the company. I know not everyone likes this look. There is a look of black or white. They chose the white, and you've got the 4 pods, and then you have this, which is your, of course, speedometer. So that's something key to point out. You also have an AM only radio. FM was available as an option, and it's just not it's not in this car. We also see, of course, it's an air conditioned car, which is a fantastic thing. Again, it's going to add a little value. Here they're showing the time. There's a few programmable things you can do with these, including the time. I think you could even do a digital speedometer, a GPS speedometer. There's all kinds of cool things you can do. The mileage here isn't going to be correct unless I believe you can tell them what the mileage is on the car, and they would program it for you. I don't know if you can program it yourself. You'd have to check with Dakota Digital. We could see here, when I saw this photo, they were just showing the fuses. This is, of course, where they're located, but I did notice this is controller, and this will tie into a part of the description that we will look at here in just a moment. Of course, it doesn't have the factory floor mats. That's, not a deal breaker, but just pointing that out. A couple of close-up photos. What we can see here in the engine bay, of course, the original Mel 430, more than likely. We can see it has the expansion tank. A lot of times this is broken, this little overflow. If the car was ever overheating, it would allow for this to spew out through here. But we could see a couple of color matched items, not factory, of course, but that would just depend on your liking. We could see it does have a 2-port, not a 3-port fuel pump. So we've got the 2 screws on top. It appears that, where they live in Colorado, that probably hasn't been an issue, but you've heard me talk about potentially I would put a 3-port Carter fuel pump on it. They do also call out that the trunk interior is done, which is fantastic. You don't always see this. There's a guy in Florida, Jim Wallace, that makes these kits. The majority of these kits, I'm assuming this one came from him, but certainly it looks a lot better than a lot of what you typically see on the market for sale. This, I'm assuming, is a speaker box. One thing I would point out is it does not have the bar here. I have a video on my channel talking about 64 and 65. You have to add a bar here, if you will, and you can buy a piece at Home Depot and cut it and install it. It's real simple. There's also a guy that sells a kit, but certainly that is something that you need to do. One thing I will point out when we talk about the paint job is you can see here red. I'm assuming this car was Fiesta red and they painted it white. A lot of times, all of this will not be painted. People just don't realize it or whatnot, but certainly you can see the red poking out here. This is the upper back panel switch on the rear deck lid. So this is the bottom of the deck lid here. Towards the bumper, and then this is up here. This is not an upgraded unit. It might have an upgraded part on the inside where these tend to break. But if John Cashman, if this was working, I wouldn't touch it. But if it needed to be replaced, I would contact John Cashman and replace that. We could see here a photo underneath the deck lid indicating. We can't see a lot from it. The deck lid does look pretty clean, which I'm happy about. But again, we don't have super clear photos. This does indicate here, we can see it does not have the black, and we can see it's polished. So these were just high-speed polished, not a deal breaker. I kind of like that look instead, to be honest with you. And then there is some literature that comes with it. This, I don't know why, is with it, but certainly it's kind of cool that it comes with it. Here's a troubleshooting diagnosis guide. This is from Jim Wallace, if I remember correctly. He sells those, and we've got the 65 maintenance manual. Now, if we look over here at some of the pros of the listing, so it is a complete car. It runs and drives, apparently. There are books provided, so literature. The trunk is finished. It is an air-conditioned car. It is a white color, which is classy, although if it was originally red, I would prefer it to be the original color, but it is what it is. The white does look good with the red. It has a sniper self-tuning EFI. Now, I'm not an expert with this. There's a guy that lives by me he's got 100,000 followers, and he is like the go-to guy for tuning GM engines, and he tells me all the time, he says, look, a lot of these self-tuning systems, although you can self-tune it, he goes, really, you still want to have an expert dial it in. Again, I'm not an expert with the Sniper kits, but what that does potentially, and that could be why they have a 2-port fuel pump on it, is if you've got electronic fuel injection, which is what EFI stands for, you've got these kits that replace a carburetor that allow for it to, not have like a cold start if your car sits for a couple weeks and, you don't have the choke set up and you go to try to start it. These EFI systems are making sure the fuel's getting to where it needs to. So that's a pro for a lot of people. For some people, they may not want the extra electronics, if you will. There are a ton of new parts, which we saw in the listing. Now, here's a couple key call-outs, okay? We do not have any videos of this car. That's unfortunate, okay? Does the top work flawlessly? Do the auto drops work? Does the AC work? Do the windows work in general, including the vent windows? What's the undercarriage look like? If this car had all this work done and the undercarriage was very rusty, I would say do not go after this car. The pictures, again, it just, and this could be someone that maybe doesn't have a lot of experience with, taking photos or uploading them, or, maybe, I don't understand why there's kind of grainy photos, but it is what it is. But here's the thing. If you were looking to buy this car, I would say you need to put eyes on it. You need to get underneath the car. You need to make sure, depending on what that destination sales office number is, was it a car that was kept indoors? Was it a car that was driven in the winter? We don't know that. This could be a California DSO, and we go, oh, wow, okay, more than likely it spent its existence in Southern California, fantastic. But those are things that we just do not know. So that's why I would say, in my opinion, 90,000 without knowing all of that other stuff is too strong of a price. I would like to see more on this car. Certainly, if we look back at Bring a Trailer and we've seen some of the prices, we just saw a 66 sell for $74,500. So you could say, hey, Jay, 65 is more desirable in many people's minds than a 66. And one over there just sold for $74,000. This thing's easily worth $80,000. I don't disagree. I could see this car selling for $80,000, but I would have to feel a little bit more confident about underneath it. Do the windows work? Do the auto drops work? And so on. Now, to the seller's credit, they did a fantastic job listing all of this out. Right? So like new valve cover gasket, new brake master cylinder gasket. There's a ton of stuff here. If I type in the letters air, there's nothing that says air condition works, air condition doesn't work, air condition was upgraded. I don't think there's anything in here, unless I'm missing it, that says anything about the AC, right? Not the end of the world. A lot of AC shops, although Lincoln's can be a headache, they would probably still work on it. They're probably going to leak test it. They're probably going to figure out what's wrong with it. But again, those are just some things that if you have an AC car and you're selling your car, you want to promote that, because again, if we look at Haggerty is saying, hey, right here, 10% more for factory AC, right? That's going to help drive a price up versus a car that doesn't have AC. But you got to promote that. Does it work? There's a lot of vacuum lines that go with it. And if it doesn't work, you just put a sentence in there that says, hey, air condition does not work, that type of thing. Again, we would need photos of it running. I would love to see a video of it cruising, of it starting. If you're listening for the car, if it was running, we'd be able to hear potentially if the manifolds are leaking. They typically will leak on these cars and will kind of cause a little bit of a popping sound that's more annoying. So it's like, okay, manifold gaskets and things like that. So again, I do think it looks to be like a pretty nice car. 65 is highly desirable. I think 90 is a little strong. The only way I could get there is if I had additional evidence to say, wow, okay, this car underneath it is super nice, and some of the other things are in line. Let me know what you think. I appreciate the support. Stay on the rise, everyone.